When megacities disappear underwater, any familiar coastal city can turn into a real ghost town at any moment. Imagine New York, the streets of Manhattan filled with salt water. Skyscrapers cast shadows over flooded subway stations, and boats float through Central Park instead of the usual strolls. Scientists from the US National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration have calculated if all the glaciers in Antarctica and Greenland melt, the global sea level will rise by almost 230 feet. Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens will be underwater, and the Statue of Liberty will become a monument barely peeking out from the waves. The same fate awaits London. According to calculations by the British Geological Society, if the glaciers disappear, water will flood the Westminster and Southwark districts. Big Ben and Westminster Abbey will end up on a small strip of land cut off from the mainland where tourists once strolled. In Paris, the Eiffel Tower will become a lighthouse amid the water, while the Louvre will sink beneath the waves, hiding its masterpieces from humanity's eyes. In Tokyo, the subway and expressways will quickly become unusable. The Shinjuku Station building will be completely flooded, and the famous Japanese highways will be covered by a layer of seawater. In China, millions of Shanghai residents will have to be evacuated. Vast districts of the city will disappear underwater, and modern business centers will exist only on digital maps in archives. This is not hypothetical. Such changes are already happening on a small scale. For example, part of Miami Beach is submerged every year during high tides, and the authorities are forced to build temporary dams right on the city streets. But if the glaciers were to melt completely, this would become an everyday reality for hundreds of megacities around the world. If you imagine the ocean gradually reclaiming over several decades what people have built over centuries, it becomes clear the first ghost cities of the future are already standing on the brink of disappearance. But while megacities might still be able to build dams and fight for survival, there are lands whose fate is essentially sealed. Entire countries could disappear from the world map forever. While megacities can still hope for dams and modern technology, for a number of countries escaping the water is fundamentally impossible. Small island nations in the Pacific Ocean are already losing their land. For example, the Republic of Kiribati consists of just 33 tiny islands scattered across the vast expanse of the ocean. A rise in sea level of just 3 feet, which scientists predict could happen in the coming decades, will lead to most of the territory being flooded. Residents of Tarawa, the capital of Kiribati, are already facing regular flooding, and schools and homes are being built on stilts in the hope of gaining at least a few more years against the ocean. The Maldives is another country on the brink of disappearing. Most of the islands rise less than 7 feet above the ocean. The local government is already buying land in Australia to relocate residents there, because it is impossible to protect the archipelago from the encroaching water, even with concrete walls. The Polynesian country of Tuvalu, where the highest point of land is less than 15 feet, regularly suffers from storm surges that flood schools, fields, and roads. Thousands of residents are forced to leave their homeland because the water destroys not only homes, but also drinking water resources and agriculture. Bangladesh, despite its vast size for a developing country, is also at risk of losing significant territory. A significant part of the country is located in the Ganges and Brahmaputra delta, just a few feet above sea level. Dikes stretching for hundreds of miles are already being built here, but it is impossible to achieve complete protection. According to UN estimates, if the sea level rises by 3 feet, nearly 30 million people will be left homeless. In Africa, the Gambia, the smallest country on the continent, is almost entirely situated in the lowlands, along the river of the same name. Even a slight rise in water level will lead to the flooding of fertile lands and villages. And in the Caribbean, on Barbados, sandy beaches are already being washed away by storms, and coastal areas regularly lose several yards of land each season. Each of these territories will be among the first to disappear if global glacier melt continues. Entire countries will be replaced by reefs and underwater hills. However, even the largest continents will not remain unchanged. These changes will affect billions of people and the very shape of the Earth itself. How will the continental appearance of the Earth change? When the global sea level rises by nearly 230 feet, the familiar map of the Earth ceases to exist. In satellite images of the future, familiar coastlines disappear, and entire parts of continents dissolve into blue patches. South Florida turns into a chain of islands, with only thin strips of land where the I-95 highway used to be, dotted with the remains of skyscrapers. Houston, New Orleans, and most of Louisiana are underwater, and the US coastline retreats dozens of miles inland. On the European continent, northern Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands lose most of their territories despite centuries of battling the sea. Amsterdam disappears, and its canals now lie underwater, along with 100 other historic cities. Southern England turns into an archipelago, and Paris becomes a coastal city with a sea horizon where there once were fields and villages. In Asia, the rising water almost completely engulfs Bangladesh, moving northward into India and swallowing up vast rice fields. Most of the Mekong Delta and the area around Ho Chi Minh City end up submerged, and the Yangtze Delta in China turns into a vast lagoon. In Australia, the entire northern coastline disappears, and the cities of Darwin and Cairns become underwater ruins. Africa loses parts of Egypt. The Nile Delta vanishes beneath the water. West Africa changes its shape. The coastal areas of Senegal, Gambia, and Nigeria are flooded, and the capitals move further inland. In the west of South America, a significant part of Argentina and Uruguay goes underwater, along with the areas around the mouth of the La Plata River. In Brazil, the lowlands along the Amazon disappear, a new bay appears, and the inland regions become the new coastline. After its glaciers have completely melted, Antarctica partially reveals land. New islands and peninsulas appear where there used to be only eternal ice. Northern Canada and Siberia become warmer and more habitable regions, and along the new coastlines, extensive shallow waters emerge ideal locations for future harbors and ports. While the familiar continents lose vast areas of land, the ocean creates new maps archipelagos from former mountain ranges. Islands where old hills once stood. All of this is already being modeled by modern scientists. NASA's institute updates global risk maps annually to help cities prepare for these changes. Although these maps remain digital forecasts for now, very soon they may become a guide to a new world where familiar borders will cease to exist. But what worries archaeologists and historians most is that it's not just land that will disappear. Along with it, ancient treasures and monuments that humanity has strived to preserve for centuries will end up underwater. As entire continents vanish before our eyes, unique historical monuments are also sinking beneath the waves along with them. In Egypt, the ruins of Alexandria, ancient porticos, Cleopatra's columns, and the remains of the famous lighthouse one of the wonders of the world will be lost forever beneath the salty water. In Italy, the flooding of the coastal areas of Veneto will result in all of Venice, along with St. Mark's Square, the Basilica, the Doge's Palace, and its ancient bridges, dissolving into the lagoon, becoming a new Atlantis for future divers. In Cambodia, the famous temple complex of Angkor Wat will find itself on the edge of a vast flood. The waters of Lake Tonle Sap will merge with the sea, and the ancient towers built 12 centuries ago will disappear beneath a shimmering layer of water. In the state of Louisiana, the same fate awaits the surviving forts from the era of French Louisiana. The old brick fortresses will turn into underwater reefs, where fish and mollusks will live instead of tourists. Greece and Turkey will see parts of their ancient cities flooded. Ephesus, Miletus, and the coastal ruins of Troy are disappearing beneath new seas. In Mexico, the Yucatan will lose its old Mayan cities, such as Tulum, which stands right on a cliff by the water. The water will erode the foundation, and the unique frescoes will sink into the depths. Spain is losing the underwater caves of Almeria, painted thousands of years ago by the first people. In the United States, the flooding of coastal fortifications and lighthouses is inevitable structures that have served as landmarks for ships for centuries. For example, the historic Fort Sumter in South Carolina, where the Civil War began, will become a popular spot for underwater tourists. In Bangladesh, the famous mosques of Baghahat, listed as UNESCO World Heritage Sites, will lose their minarets under the pressure of the waters of the Bay of Bengal. Almost all archaeological sites located close to the sea or on plains will become inaccessible forever. Ancient Carthage, the ruins of Tyre and Sidon, parts of Rome near the coast, all of these will turn into underwater cities, protected from the passage of time only by a layer of water. All that will be left is to hope that modern technology will allow us to study at least some of the buried treasures. After all, with the disappearance of these monuments, humanity loses not only the physical remnants of the past, but also entire layers of knowledge about itself. But the changes brought about by a global flood are not limited to historical losses. Along with the disappearance of cities and monuments, a chain of disasters is set in motion, which directly affects the climate, economy, and the lives of people all over the planet. When vast stretches of land vanish beneath the water, it's not just maps and heritage that change. A whole chain of catastrophes is triggered, instantly involving climate processes and the global economy. The melting of glaciers releases not only water, but also billions of tons of carbon dioxide and methane that have been trapped in permafrost for thousands of years. The concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere rises sharply. The climate becomes unstable, and the planet experiences more frequent destructive hurricanes, tropical storms, and droughts. Coastal hurricanes gain enormous strength, sweeping away everything in their path. For example, Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans destroyed an entire city. And in the future, such disasters could occur every year in new areas. As fertile deltas like the Nile, Ganges, and Mekong disappear, entire regions lose their arable land. Crops are dying not only because of salt water, but also due to accelerated droughts in inland areas. Exports of rice, wheat, and corn are falling, global prices are fluctuating, and hundreds of millions of people are losing access to food. In the US, the disappearance of the California Valley or Louisiana would deprive the country of a significant portion of its agricultural export. And in Asia, a country like Vietnam would almost completely lose its rice fields. At the same time, the temperature of the water in the world's oceans is rising. Coral reefs are dying, fish are disappearing, and millions of people working in the fishing industry are losing their livelihoods. Ports and cities built along trade routes have to construct new harbors far inland. This means billions of dollars in losses and complex infrastructure challenges. Dams and power plants designed for the old sea level become useless or even destroyed, causing power outages across entire continents. The movement of huge numbers of people begins to snowball. In place of the flooded countries and states, there are lines of refugees. Tens of millions are searching for new homes. The inland states of the US suddenly become overpopulated. Cities in Russia and Canada take in millions of migrants from the former coastal regions. And the countries that still have at least some land left build walls and checkpoints along their new borders. A chain of economic shocks affects almost every industry from agriculture to insurance, from construction to logistics. The stock markets are in turmoil. Investments in familiar areas disappear, and the budgets of entire countries are spent on repairing dams, resettlement, evacuation, and restoring infrastructure. Many large companies relocate their headquarters, lose thousands of employees, and coastal industries are shut down for good. This world, where everything depends on the whims of water, becomes unpredictable and expensive to live in. But even amid global crises, people are left with only one path to seek new solutions where the water has not yet flooded the shores. After all, the relocation of billions, the construction of new cities, and attempts to find advantages in a changed world are only the beginning of a new chapter in history, where the ground beneath our feet is always one step away from disappearing. Where will people live if their homes end up underwater? In a situation where the water level rises by nearly 230 feet, ordinary migration turns into a global resettlement of peoples. According to UN experts, more than 2 billion people find their homes at risk of flooding. Waves of refugees begin moving inland from the coasts of Bangladesh, China, and Vietnam. New cities are emerging along the Himalayas in northern India. In a region where hardly anyone lived before, millions of migrants from the Ganges and Brahmaputra deltas are now settling. The Indian government announces the construction of massive camps and emergency employment programs to prevent widespread hunger and unrest. In North America, major coastal megacities are disappearing and streams of residents are heading toward the Great Lakes region into Montana and Wyoming. The cities of Minneapolis, Denver, and Chicago are expanding rapidly. New residential neighborhoods, schools, and clinics are being built urgently within them. Construction companies are receiving government contracts worth billions of dollars, creating temporary camps for hundreds of thousands of families. In Canada, where cold used to dominate most of the year, construction is moving northward. Along the shores of Hudson Bay, new settlements are appearing for refugees from the flooded areas of Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. In Australia, the flow of refugees from the north is concentrating around cities in the south. Melbourne and Adelaide are becoming megacities, with the local population doubling over several decades. Authorities are buying up land in the suburbs to build high-rise districts for new citizens relocated from the flooded areas of Cairns and Darwin. Even in the traditionally sparsely populated states of South Australia and Western Australia, new large cities are emerging. In Europe, as the coasts of the Netherlands, Germany, and France go underwater, millions of people are heading to Poland, the Czech Republic, and the Balkans. Huge convoys of cars and buses form on the roads, and temporary shelters are built near major rivers. In Russia, cities beyond the Urals are expanding. Novosibirsk, Omsk, and Krasnoyarsk are becoming international centers for refugees from the coastal regions of Europe and Asia. In settlements beyond the Arctic Circle, new schools, hospitals, and ports are being built, because millions of people who used to live in the south are moving here. In Africa, migration is moving toward the high plateaus of Ethiopia and the eastern regions of Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. Along the Great African Lakes, giant cities are growing, where millions of migrants from the flooded coastal areas of West and North Africa are arriving. Multi-kilometer chains of tent camps are appearing on the slopes of the Rwenzori Mountains and the Ethiopian highlands, where local authorities are distributing land plots to the newcomers. In South America, the new frontier runs along the Andes. Capitals are moving inland, and the area around La Paz or Bogota is literally overflowing with migrants from Argentina, Brazil, and Chile. Mountain passes and high-altitude valleys are being transformed into huge settlements, and roads are being modernized to accommodate millions of people. The global migration is accompanied by construction booms and conflicts over resources. Cities on the new coastline are springing up in just a few years. Water supply and food distribution have to be centrally controlled. Economic alliances are being reconsidered. Governments are developing new migration laws, and scientists are tasked with finding optimal areas for the compact settlement of millions of people. Thus, while old megacities and countries disappear, humanity is rapidly building new settlements where there was once only tundra or steppe. But this forced restructuring of the world brings not only stress. Somewhere on these new shores, some people get a chance to start from scratch, while others are able to use the changed climate to their advantage in completely unexpected areas. New shores, new opportunities, unexpected consequences of the global flood. When billions of people move to new shores, not only borders begin to change, but also lifestyles. Floating platforms quickly appear in place of the old coastal cities. Former oil platforms and barges are transformed into new settlements for those who don't want to move far from the old coastline. In northern Canada and Alaska, mineral resources that were previously inaccessible due to permafrost begin to be actively developed. Roads are built right across former ice fields, and drones become the main method of delivering goods between remote settlements. In Europe, on the new sea shallows, Dutch engineers are constructing artificial islands from sand and concrete, creating protected ports for shipping and fishing. In Siberia and northern Russia, climate-controlled greenhouses are being actively built. On lands freed from ice, vegetables and grain are grown, which makes it possible to provide food for millions of resettlers. In China and Mongolia, projects are emerging to build biofarms and solar power plants on new coastal plains that were previously unsuitable for agriculture. Along the new shores of South America, unique tourist routes are opening up. Divers and researchers flock to the sunken cities of the old world, where you can now see the streets of Buenos Aires or Rio beneath a layer of water. In Africa, coastal cities on the shores of the Great Lakes are turning into new centers of trade and logistics. International consortia are investing billions of dollars in relocating industries inland and developing new ports. In Australia, the southern regions are becoming centers of innovation. Here, technology company campuses are opening, and former pastures are being settled by people and robotic farms. New resorts are appearing on shores that were previously barely suitable for living. Even in Antarctica, where the first cities are emerging on land freed from ice, scientific bases and tourist villages are being built. Airlines are launching regular flights, and scientists are studying new ecosystems. Along with the movement of people, unexpected changes are taking place in the economy. Old capitals are losing their influence, while new business and cultural centers are emerging in places that until recently were considered remote backwaters. Maritime shipping routes are changing. Giant ships now pass through areas that used to be forests and hills. Underwater tourism and archaeology are developing. The ruins of old cities are becoming sites for new expeditions and documentary films. All these changes prove that even a global catastrophe brings not only destruction, but also unexpected opportunities. Humanity finds its chances for new beginnings, builds cities, redefines borders, and develops territories that were previously inaccessible. This new world is already taking shape right before our eyes. The future will not be where the old shores once lay, but at the boundary between water and land, where once there was only ocean.